Okay guys, so here I am in my garage. I'm speaking probably quieter than I normally do because it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. I laid in bed for a good hour and a half attempting to get to sleep. Totally unsuccessful, as usual, having a lot of trouble sleeping at night. So I decided to come here and do a video. A pretty off-the-cuff video. I'm being a little quieter because I'm not sure what's above me. I know my neighbor's place is above me, and I'm not sure if it's a bedroom or not that's above me. I think part of their bedroom is over there, which is, you can see the wall from here. That wall, my neighbor has their garage, and I know part of their bedroom is above their garage. I'm not sure what's above mine. I don't really hear people walking around up there or anything, but it may be a bedroom, so I'm not going to scream and shout and play a drum solo, being it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. What I thought I would do is start a new thread for myself, and maybe for others, if anybody else is interested in picking up on this at any point. It would be interesting for me to see. And that is something I got thinking about when I showed some albums recently that I'm going to show again. You know, I've got a lot of albums that I've never shown here in the VC since I started making videos, but I keep coming back to certain albums that I keep showing for different reasons. Sometimes it's just what I'm listening to, sometimes it's because they're my favorite albums or favorite artists, whatever. But I got this idea in my head to do a video about albums that I wish everyone in the world owned, or everybody that's heavily into music. And it was one of those fleeting ideas that if I don't make a video, I know I'm going to forget. I'm going to forget to do it. You know, I'm going to forget the subject matter here. So you probably wouldn't be surprised to see things that I've shown in pretty much all my, many of my other videos, because the first thing we gravitate towards is usually our favorites. And I do have a few new acquisitions that I'll just wait to show. And I don't know if I can explain why, but I'll try. I'm going to start. I've only got. I actually pretty much all these albums I have on compact disc, but I pulled out the vinyl versions because the vinyl versions are bigger pictures and you get a better view of them, on camera. But these are pretty random. A lot of ECM albums here, I noticed. But I was just going through the 2 stacks I have on my bedroom floor. And I plan to do future videos on this theme, and I'll just select from other stacks of albums that I've got around when I do that. So, it's... people that know me well and know my tastes are probably going to think, oh, how come you didn't mention this or that one? It's probably just because it wasn't in the stack, and it will be in a future video of this, type. I just kind of went through some bundles I had sitting right there. I'm going to start with a CD only because I've only got a couple CDs to show. This one I talked about in my last video. Music from Ancient Greece by the ensemble that I'm not going to try to pronounce. Orgonographia, which is all of 3 people that built all these instruments of ancient Greece, and I talked about this in my last video, and actually I pulled this album out even before that. My buddy Carm actually bought a copy of it because I was talking about it so much. It's great night music. To me, this is the kind of thing that I play at this time of day at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep. Not because it helps get me to sleep, but there's a quietness, very light music, very light stringed instruments, and a little bit of vocal and you know, a little bit of flute type instruments, but all ancient Greek type of instruments. And this is one of the albums that I wish everybody had. And when did this come out? This looks like this is from 1997, at least this version of it. So it's not like an ancient album. And this ensemble, which is only 3 people, 2 of them being a husband and wife, have done a few albums of ancient musics. And I think they got into some Chinese ancient music on some of them. And I haven't picked those up yet, but I will. But this one in particular, the music isn't hard to get into if you're open to it. And it's the kind of thing that people that are hardcore music fans, it's a place that only certain albums, usually quieter ones, can occupy in your mind. It's very, very much full of visual images, as are probably a lot of these albums I'm going to show. The next one, which is something I've shown a lot, is an album I picked up in 1978. Soundtrack to a movie called Lifespan. At least in America it was called Lifespan. And it was the first Terry Riley album I ever picked up. Sorry for the glare. And I had no idea who Terry Riley was. I was looking for new and interesting music, and this was in the import bins, and it looked like an all-solo album, which it is. Just Terry Riley on, I believe it's Hammond organ, with using many different settings of the Hammond organ. A lot of different sounds on here, all coming from the Hammond organ. He also plays a little bit of saxophone, does a little bit of voice on there, wordless voice, and plays the tabla drums on one track as well. This is made in France, the Stiff Records edition. This is only about 30 minutes long, and this is one of the albums that I most wanted to get in my, this is in my top 10 of albums of all time. And it's one of the albums that I was just dying for it to come out on CD. And it didn't come out. And I thought, it got to the point that it was so many years ago, and it's such an obscure album, and an even more obscure movie. And it's about 30, between 30 and 31 minutes long. And with the movie not being popular, and the album not really being a popular album, and the years going by, I never thought it would see release on CD. And then all of a sudden, I kept looking, of course. In 2007, it did come out. And I think this is courtesy of, I'm not sure if it's Terry Riley's own label, but his hand was certainly in it. So thankfully Terry Riley's still around to re-release it, obviously a different cover. And they included another soundtrack album from roughly the same period, which was actually this album here. And it's good because the 30-minute length of the other one is pretty damn short. And this particular album, which is 2 tracks that are about 18 and a half minutes long each, is from a 1972 movie. I know nothing about this movie, unlike the other one, which I've seen. And so, with this album being about 37 or 38 minutes long, and again, I think this is a French film, and I have no idea whether or not this ever came out in the U.S. It's a great pairing. The music is compatible, and this isn't, I don't think anything could be up there with the Lifespan soundtrack, the first album I showed. But this is a good pairing, and to have it on one CD at the cost of, a single CD. And you have just under about 70 minutes worth of music on the CD edition, which is, at least in the U.S., very, very easily available. And I don't know if I could, most of these albums have a similar quality, and that's very interior music. I don't think any of the albums that I'm about to show have very much aggressive, say, drumming on it or anything like that. So it's all really quiet stuff that, if you don't pay attention, can flow right by you. If you pay attention, there's a lot of payoff. And of course, a lot of these are just because they happen to be in the stacks, but also current stuff for me and things that I've been listening to and lately, especially with the passing of John Abercrombie. My favorite album of all time, Characters by John, just his only all solo album. How do you play for 45 minutes with only a single guy and only 3 instruments, and yet it never gets samey sounding? All it is a 6-string acoustic guitar, a 6-string electric guitar, and his little electric mandolin. And yet for 45 minutes, there's enough variation that he uses and mixing the instruments in different combinations that it never gets old. It was recorded in November '77. This is maybe the second album I think I picked up of John's. And that's another one. Obviously no drums on there. I guess you could describe it as laid back. I don't think that's the intent there. It's just one of those, I think in a lot of ways, quiet music, if you can tune into it, has an intensity to it that almost nothing else does, because it seeps into you rather than being a physical thing like with a lot of drums where you physically might want to get up and move or something like that. This stuff speaks to a different part of you. And literally all of this music calls up, even the more mainstreamy things I'm about to show, calls up a lot of imagery for me. When you just listen to it, if you close your eyes or do whatever, I don't know. Can you listen to it without these visual images coming up? I don't even know if it's possible. So here's another one. And recorded just before the John Abercrombie Characters album I just showed, a duet album with Ralph Towner and John Abercrombie, Sargasso Sea. And again, a very interior album. Just 2 guitarists. Ralph playing a 12-string acoustic guitar and the nylon string classical guitar, and puts a bit of piano in there. And the piano is really the thing that helps color and prevent the album from sounding the samey. It's about 40 minutes long, and John on the electric guitar and the acoustic guitar. When John plays acoustic guitar, though, Ralph is playing the classical guitar, so you can always tell who's doing what. But the addition of piano on maybe about 2 tracks, I think, really colors the whole thing very nicely, and again prevents it from having that samey sound. And again, this was recorded in May 1976. Very, very much interior music. A few of these albums I'm going to show do have like drums. They're a little more conventional, though. But I'll save those to the end. I got more ECM, but I'm going to skip over to this one because here's one of Harold Budd's first albums, The Pavilion of Dreams. Now, a lot of people consider this to be his first album. Technically, it's not his first album, but the one thing he had out prior to this was very early and very much formative. Not really the Harold Budd type of music. I don't think he had really completely formed his vision yet at that point. But by the time this album came around, it did. And this is an ensemble album. But again, there's no percussion on here. It's very quiet. It's like the Greek album in a way. I guess, you know what, you could even play those two side by side. There's a couple shorter pieces just for female soprano vocals and a classical harp. And there's almost no electric instruments on here at all, with the exception of Harold Budd playing electric piano in a couple of the tracks. And it gives it a nice color. The other instruments are, you have Marion Brown playing saxophone on one track, which is beautiful. There's a harp on numerous tracks. Marimbas, there's 4 marimba players on one long track, which is just an amazing, instead of being real percussive like a Steve Reich kind of thing, it actually just makes a nice soft bed for the saxophone and the piano and the harp to play over. And there's chorus vocals, not really singing words. that are nice, you know, long sustained notes. Just a beautiful album, and you know, as early as it came in Harold Budd's career, it doesn't sound formative at all. It doesn't sound like an early album. It sounds like he really knew by this point already what he was doing. And again, another Interior album. Here's one that a ton of people will know. Back to the ECM stuff. Terry J. Riptle's After the Rain, still my favorite album of his. And again, the cover picture is a great thing to stare at when you listen to the music. It's Terry J. all by himself, and again, the only time he's done that. This is like the John Abercrombie Characters thing. And there's Terry J. in the studio, and doing a lot of overdubs. Well, not a lot. There's a couple pieces where Terry J's playing acoustic guitar, and to date, it's the only time I've ever heard him play acoustic guitar. And one of those is just a live acoustic guitar thing. All the pieces are pretty much very short. And then the second acoustic guitar piece actually has him playing 2 acoustic guitars. So not necessarily a ton of overdubbing. There's quite a few pieces that are maybe like three pieces, like 2 keyboards and a guitar or something like that. And then there's a couple pieces that are a bit more expansive. Some synthesizer, some keyboard, guitar over that, even a little bit of flute. Tiny little bit of saxophone in the first track. Technically, you could say it's not really a solo album. His wife at the time does a couple vocal oohs and ahs on what is about 2 tracks of the album, but they're mixed very low. And whenever she's doing her vocals, it's always a string synthesizer playing, and it actually sounds like the voices could easily be a synthesizer patch. And nowadays would be. Back when this was recorded in 76. They didn't have the synthesizer patches, didn't have the kind of voices that you do now. If he were to record this today, I'm sure he would just use the voice on the synthesizer patches, which pretty much sound identical to the little bits that his wife adds on. I think only about 2 tracks on here out of the 10 tracks on here. Great album, still my favorite album of his. It's dated very well. It doesn't sound old or really of the period necessarily, and especially for him, because he gets a little wild on the electric guitar, it's not as aggressive as a lot of his things are. Here's one. I'm sure I've shown this. This is my copy that I bought. I was wearing out my copy of this. Eberhard Weber's Fluid Russell from 1979. One of the first albums, I think this is a second album I bought by Eberhard Weber, recorded January of 79. This is one of his compositional albums. It's not a group album with drums and a lot of improvisation. This is one where there's little bits of improvisation here and there, but it's mostly a written out thing. 2 female vocalists who are not, who are singing harmonies, not words. So their voices are really being used as an instrument. Eberhard Weber on bass, and there's a little like percussion instrument in there, like almost like a bass drum you hear only at times. Bill Frisell, this was his first professional studio recording for I guess like a major label. He plays guitar and balalaika, which is is it Greek? I think it's a Greek stringed instrument, and it's very noticeable. He only plays it in one part of one of the tracks for a few minutes, and he's strumming basically a single chord on it, and then everything happens around him. Very interesting sound. And Gary Burton on vibraphone and marimba, and the marimba and the vibraphone are the slightly percussive elements in there. Because there's no other real drums except for that occasional bass drum that pops in every once in a while. But it's not don't picture like bass drum like you hear in techno music or rock. It's one of those albums that, to the uninitiated, or people that aren't open to a lot of different types of music, may sound kind of weird at times. But it's one of those interior albums, great for this time of day, middle of the night. I'd open my garage door so you can see how dark it is outside, except I think like my neighbors upstairs would definitely hear that. Another ECM classic, another old solo album, Blue Sun by Ralph Towner from '82, recorded in December of '82. Again, Ralph on 12-string and classical guitars, piano. This was the first album that he was using synthesizer on, at least his first solo album. I'm pretty sure this predated him using it in Oregon. He also plays, interestingly, French horn, cornet, and percussion on here, which is not something you hear him play a lot. And there's some light percussion. There's things like tambourine and things like no drums, some shakers and a tambourine and that kind of thing in only some of the tracks. And then we go on to, I don't even know how many albums this is. I just pulled out a bunch. And one of the ones that I thought I had with me, I don't have with me. But that's okay, because this is going to be I'm going to do several other videos of this type. And I've shown this as well. Now this does have drums. This is a fairly conventional, almost easy listening album, Night Glow. But it's so beautiful. It has a beat, it has a drum kit, it has a very standard instrumentation in terms of a band with, a drummer, bass player Steve Swallow, Larry Willis on piano and electric piano, and Carla Bley on organ and synthesizers, the late Hiram Bullock on guitar, percussion, and a drummer, and a horn section. There's charts written out for the horns, which are just beautiful. It's a 5-piece horn section that includes Paul McCandless from Oregon and Randy Brecker and John Clark, 3 of the guys. Those are really, really beautiful horn charts in the background. This is a bit, I wouldn't say it's aggressive music. It certainly isn't, compared to the other stuff, But it's a beautiful, mellow album, probably her most accessible album ever. Now here's one that I've been meaning to show for a long time that a lot of people aren't going to be into, and I'll explain why. But Wes Montgomery's Bumpin' album, this one in particular, arranged and conducted by Don Sebesky. Now this is one of his later day albums, whereas Wes had several different periods, and this is one where he started playing shorter songs with orchestral arrangements, so people were saying, oh, it's easy listening. But it was a transitionary period. He was going from the jazz stuff, but the last few albums of his career, he was basically playing instrumental versions of pop songs and keeping them very short, like 3 minutes. This is somewhere in between there, because the songs are shorter. There is this beautiful orchestration done by Don Sebesky, and but they're not doing like the pop songs yet, like California Dreaming and a lot of songs like that from the late 60s. These are still original tracks, tracks by Don Sebesky, jazz things. So they're not, this is from, well, the date on this is 65. I don't know, it was recorded 64, 65. But there's a version of Here's That Rainy Day on here, which is what turned me on to the song. It starts off beautifully. It's one of the most perfect tracks I've ever heard in my life. It's maybe, 4 minutes long or so. But it starts off with the most beautiful strings before the band kicks in. A very laid-back ballad, drums, guitar, bass, piano. A lot of strings in there. But it's really beautiful. And if you just could kind of put your the whole thing out of your mind of classifying it as an easy listening album, I think you could really appreciate the beauty of it. There's not a lot of up-tempo stuff on here, though there are, a drum kit thing on here. But this is such a fantastic album. This has been out, I have the CD. This has been out on CD for years. It's been reissued on CD numbers of times. But this is not one of the jazz albums where he's playing 13-minute solos, but it's also not one of the pop albums where he's just basically doing new instrumental 3-minute versions of what was current on pop radio from, say, 1964 to 68 when he passed away. There's more jazz content here and original pieces that were, I think, written for the album by Don Sebesky. Don Sebesky, just based on his work on this album alone, gets my vote for the best arranger ever. I have to accept Gil Evans from that, but Gil Evans is a whole other category, I think. I'm trying to keep this under my usual 6-hour video. I will say, only because we're getting very much toward October now, Halloween is my favorite time of year, and it comes and goes too quickly. I like Halloween better than my birthday, and better than Christmas, and better than anything. And any sign of it I welcome. And unfortunately, the weather hasn't cooperated. It's nearly October, and it should be a good 30 degrees cooler than it is. So it doesn't feel like autumn yet, even though it technically is. I'm going to try to remember to include in all the videos that I make leading up to Halloween. I'm going to try to remember to include in my description box links to Halloween-oriented stories and things like that that are folders that I created within my YouTube channel page, that anybody that is into Halloween as I am, if that's possible, might want to hear this stuff. Did I show this last time? I got a couple old albums that I bought back in the vinyl days. Lights Out of the radio show, and on side A, and then side B was A Witch's Tale, which is another radio show similar to Lights Out, that from 1930, I don't know, it was on from about 30 to 38, or 39, because this episode is from 39, that I actually am glad that I don't have to take my defective turntable and attempt to record these into my computer, because that album and the one I'm about to show is actually up. Here's the other one. This is just a fun album, Ghost Stories, that I bought. I bought back in the vinyl days, naturally. This is back from 70-something. 76, 77, something like that. And I just love it. You can call it hokey, but I just love it. And I found this album also that somebody has put it up on YouTube. So I quickly put that in my folder. And so I can listen to it, and I'm gonna put the links to the folders as well in my channel that I created, so that you guys can listen to this again. And it looks like I'm going to be able to keep this video under 2.5 hours. I probably had other things I wanted to say, and I'm going to do further albums that I wish everyone in the world had, so we could all speak about them, and I would love to get everybody else's perception on these records that has heavily listened to them, and what they think of them, and things like the conditions they listen to them in. A lot of these albums, I mean, I've listened to them at any time of the day, but a lot of these albums I really best listen to it late at night when everything is very still. So I'm going to do my random album pick now, and just hope that I don't end up with a Britney Spears. Again, this is too easy. I got a lot of ECMs in there, and I might have to pull some of this stuff out, because this is as easy as the last time I pulled out. Actually, so far we got 3 for 3. They're all ECM albums. The first time I did this, I pulled out Book of Ways by Keith Jarrett, which spurred me on to go buy the CD because I didn't have it on CD. Second time I pulled out David Darling's Cycles, which thankfully I already had on CD, or else it would spur me on to spend more money and go get it on CD. And this one, here's the thing that pisses me off. I would pull out the one Ralph Towner album that I have on vinyl that I still haven't bought on CD, and I'm going to try and not spend money and pick it up on CD, but damn it, once I pull these out and I talk about them, then I just got to hear them again and I want them on CD. And this is the one I don't have on CD. I mean, I don't have all his current stuff, every single album of his, but this is the only one from the vinyl era that I have not picked up on CD, and that's Solo Concert. Just guitars, just 12-string and classical guitars on this one. This was recorded in October 1979 as a live concert, but in very much, you could hear how excellent a guitarist he is in this context. I prefer my solo albums to be done in the studio with overdubs, and like he did on Blue Sun, which is an album I pulled out earlier that I showed of Ralph's. And this is really the first album of Ralph's career. It's turned out to be quite a thing with him in the last 15 years or so, where he hasn't done live albums, but he's done a lot of solo guitar albums where he doesn't play any other instruments, he doesn't pull out the keyboards and play them, or do any overdubbings, but he does them live in the studio. And most of his recent albums in the last 15 years, not counting his work with the Oregon, have been solo guitar albums recorded in the studio, so they're essentially live albums in the studio. And I wish he would just go and use the studio, do overdubbing, put the keyboards back in there, the percussion, the French horn that he plays on occasion. But this was the first one that was just an old guitar album, live. This one happened to be in concert, so of course it's live. And really, really, really good album. I would like to hear this again. And I may end up buying the CD of this. I would pull out the one Ralph Tanner album that I don't have on CD that I have on LP figures. Okay, so I'm going to keep this, under my normal 6-hour video. And, since it's about 1:30 in the morning now. Thanks for watching. Feel free to leave comments. Or to pick up on the thread and do a video on albums that you wish everyone had. And why did I do this? Why do I wish everyone had this album? Because these albums, it's kind of a universal thing. It's not different from one album to the other. I just wish everybody could appreciate them, especially with most of this batch of albums, because these are very, like I said, they're very interior albums. They're very low-key, and I think there's just something special about music like this in general, that when you understand it and you get into it, it gets into you in a way that other types of more aggressive music don't. This isn't body music. It's not music that you probably would, for the most part, ever tap your feet to or anything like that. It hits you on a different level. And I wish everyone could experience it, which is probably, one of the other reasons why I would like everyone to have these albums. In addition to, if everyone did, we could all talk about them in great detail. Okay, guys. Going to keep it short for me. And I'll be back soon. Hope everybody's doing well. And I want to keep doing videos on a much more regular basis up until after Halloween, at least. Or up until the weather gets so cold that I have to go back inside and not do it in my garage. Take care, everybody.